Well, good evening, everybody. I'm John O'Loughlin, and welcome to my channel. It's called McDuff Lives. And tonight I'm introducing a new series. It's called McDuff Matters. It'll be my Monday night show for probably all of July. We'll see how long it goes, but the point is that Monday nights we're going to be getting a little bit more in depth as to my father's life and talking about the book McDuff Lives that I've just finished writing on June the 6th of 2021, exactly 50 years after my father's death in 1971. So we've been working together, a lot of us here, for like 4 years and digging into my father's career and the general state of our country during his career, which lasted, of course, from the beginning of World War II, when he joined the Nazis at Harvard. Uh, and he actually joined the service in the summer of 1942, or the spring or summer of 1942, just as he graduated from Harvard and went directly into the Naval Midshipman School at Columbia University in New York City. Anyway, um, starting off the show tonight with this beautiful meme that was made for us by our great website producer and great, producer of just about everything at screamingospreys.com. And she's schedules our guests for the show, and she does our memes every week. So we've got two great memes from Catherine Jumping Mouse to enjoy. This one about the show, McDuff Matters, and then another one, which is the weekly teaser for this week, which I will leave you to see on Twitter or elsewhere. I guess that's where we post everything, is Twitter. If you guys want to, if you're new to McDuff and you want to know how to keep up with what's going on, do consider signing up for Twitter. Also, get yourself an account here at YouTube. You don't have to post anything, but that'll enable you to have a presence in the chat room and possibly even one day, if you're very, very lucky, get to be a wrench. And there's Kathy Sue. Now, what happened to Kathy Sue's wrench? Didn't she used to have a wrench? I don't know. Okay. Well, anyway, great, Kathy. Glad you're here. I'm on my own tonight with the production, so you might hear me tapping away with my mouse on the table there, and getting used to um, how to navigate here on StreamYard without the help of Andy and Aaron. Aaron is working tonight at his job. Andy is en route to Texas with his dad and taking a week away from the studio, which well deserved. I hope he gets a lot of rest and enjoys the trip with his dad. What a great idea! And yeah, so here we are. It's just you guys and me. Hello, David Underdown, Corky Goss, Kathy Sue, Nadia, Infidel, Kevin, ECAT, Rhina, and Biomancer is here. All the sun on deck. That's good. Um, well, excuse me just a second. So, during the course of our investigation, we've had things turn up that I had no idea we would find. And um, one of them is the book in the upper left of my show meme there, Cassidy's Run. It's this book right here. And I had no idea. David Wise is he's gone now. He's passed away, but he was one of the great whistleblowing authors of the 20th century, 21st century, and his work on James Angleton is really, really important. He's a guy that really had a lot of inside contacts and wrote some really important books, including this one called Cassidy's Run, The Secret Spy War Over Nerve Gas. Now, we have in this book on page 60, no, 42 to 43, a mention of my father. And the context is it's in 1966. So McDuff, Tom O'Loughlin, my dad, has been working at SACSA since 1962, where he at SACSA is the Special Assistant for Counterinsurgency and Special Activities, which was created by President Kennedy in 1961 in order to take special operations, covert operations generally, away from the CIA and give them to the Pentagon and directly in the hands of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. And with Fletcher Prouty, who has written two very important books, The Secret Team and JFK, the assassination of JFK and the Vietnam era. Those two books show how the Kennedy administration created this office called SACSA with the intention of it being an independent agency that would work directly under the president. And so if the president needed a covert operation, it would be done through the president to the National Security Council to the Pentagon, meaning the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and then directly into SACSA for the planning and the putting together the operation. So that's where my dad worked. He was the counterinsurgency planner was his job title. And he worked in the part of SACSA called Special Activities. Andy had come up with a great flow chart there of the exact way that SACSA was organized when it was created in 1961, 62. I don't think it was really staffed until 62, but my dad joined the organization on April the 2nd of 1962, I now can tell you. So, but where did my dad came from? He came from the FBI, where he had been a special agent of some distinction under J. Edgar Hoover since 1949, when he graduated from law school. And instead of following the path laid out for him by his father, not by his father, by his family of origin, by his uncle, actually, who was hoping to drive my dad's decision making, his Uncle John, because his father had been basically sidelined from family decision making as a result of his divorce from McDuff's mother way back in 1922. So here we are in 1949. My dad graduates from law school, and the family expects him to go into the local law firm in Hartford, Connecticut, or maybe even on Wall Street itself, and bring the family further along in the upward mobility, the chase of upward mobility that all immigrant families are always involved in. So this immigrant Irish family was hoping to get higher and higher in the society, still run by the old WASP families, white Anglo-Saxon Protestant families of New England and particularly Connecticut. So the idea was that my dad was going to help the family get further integrated into the establishment. And my dad just wouldn't do it. He didn't want to do it. He didn't want to be part of that establishment. He wanted to uh, live his own life on his own terms. And well, that ended up in him kind of leaving the family home, leaving Hartford, leaving that life behind, and joining the FBI, where he was sent to, well, he went to the FBI Academy, of course, and after that was assigned to Atlanta, where he met and fell in love with my mother and got married pretty much without telling the family about it, pretty much the way that his father had done before, repeating in a way his own father's quote, mistake. So was my father then to be cut out of the family and treated as an outcast in a way that his father was? Um, well, that's when I came along, and they showed. I have pictures of me wearing Loomis T-shirts and Loomis sweatshirts, and holding a football like I'm going to be the next O'Loughlin to go to Loomis and play football, just like my dad did. But and the truth is, my dad told me he didn't want me to play football. Don't play football. Uh, I wasn't just telling me; he ordered me. So you're not allowed to play football. I was never allowed to play football, and I'm. I think there's a lot of good reasons for that. But we'll talk about that another time. Experiences my dad had playing football also kind of shaped his moral choices. Well, the book by David Wise refers to my dad in a kind of to me, an absolutely hysterical way. I'm just going to read it to you. Um, Now they're putting together a feed of some documents that contain a formula or information about how to create a certain kind of nerve gas, and this is actually not not a real formula, but a kind of a fake formula that they're going to pass to the Soviets in the hope that it will divert the Soviets from other programs that they might be studying, and that the Soviets will end up spinning their wheels trying to understand or create this particular nerve gas. Well, anyway, so they've created this, and it's called the feed. That is the documents that they're going to hand. And here's the paragraph that refers to my dad. One of those who ended up clearing the feed, as counterintelligence agents call such material, was Tom O'Loughlin, a former FBI agent who by 1962 had moved over to the Pentagon as the direct result of a diktat by FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover. According to Bevel's, O'Loughlin ran afoul of Hoover's edicts that FBI agents had to meet strict weight standards. Hoover had a physical and found that his weight was higher than the metropolitan life standard, unquote, Bevel said. He went on a diet and felt so good he decided everyone would have to do it. Tom had a lot of trouble making weight, unquote. The problem was with the feed, of course, was the need to balance Cassidy's credibility with the requirements of secrecy. These contradictory demands could never be completely reconciled, as in every such operation, some secrets had to be given away in order to protect the double agent. Officials in Washington were thus passing secret information to the Soviets, the disclosure of which by anyone else could have resulted in a long prison term for violation of the federal espionage laws. The difficult balancing act often led to tensions between the FBI and the Joint Chiefs. The Bureau wanted to keep the Russians convinced by passing significant documents, but the Pentagon was reluctant to part with its classified secrets. It was hard to get the military to give us stuff. Sometimes we wanted to put classification stamps on documents that weren't classified, and we had trouble getting clearances from the military even to do that. So the FBI at that point is working to entrap Russian spies. That had been my dad's job when he was with the FBI up until from 49 to 62. So here is Cassidy's run, and the author David Wise is quoting somebody named Bevels as telling the story of why my dad moved to the Pentagon. And and what they say is because he was too overweight to pass the physical at the FBI, and so he ran afoul of Mr. Hoover, and so he was kicked over to the Pentagon. And I must tell you, that's ridiculous. It, 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 it is a cover story. It is the kind of thing that they will make up, like this guy's really not important, right? I mean, he was just this guy. He couldn't please Hoover, so they had to give him a job, right? So they said, "Okay, you go work for the Pentagon in the most important special operations uh, uh, um, uh, outfit that's ever been created. You just go over there." And so anyway, no, his it was a promotion and advancement from my dad to go to the Pentagon. It was a raise in his GS status and his salary, and I think also his own self-esteem. He was very pleased and proud to be serving his country in such a high position, directly working under the Joint Chiefs of Staff to fulfill the requirements of the president. Unfortunately, the other government agency, known as the CIA, was at that time basically infiltrating and taking over the operations that had been taken away from them by President Kennedy, because by 1966 you have President Lyndon Johnson, and has taken a completely opposite view, um, wanting wanting to run that big war and thereby turn the counterinsurgency operation, which was designed to really win the hearts and minds of the Vietnamese people, something that is never talked about anymore. But that's one of the things you'll learn if you read my book about how a Marine general named Victor Krulak was the authority on counterinsurgency at the time, and he had written a number of papers on how to do it. And the way to do it is to support the local villagers, the farmers, the local towns or whatever they have, villages need security. They need a way to get their crops to market and sell them, and not to be not to be killed by the enemy at the same time. So what counterinsurgency really requires is a commitment by the government, in the South Vietnamese case, by the South Vietnamese government to support the people. And of course, the opposite happened. They tried to put all the people into these hamlets, the strategic hamlet program, and then they imposed the Phoenix program onto the people of Vietnam. Those were not counterinsurgency strategies. Those are totalitarian war fighting strategies that you impose, not to win hearts and minds, but to simply take over and use elimination tactics to get rid of anybody that questions your right to rule. Well, my dad was there working, I think, generally as a choice of the Kennedy administration, and he was working under the Marine General Victor Krulak that I just spoke of. So both my dad and General Krulak had a attitude towards special operations that was completely the opposite of the CIA's attitude, in which the CIA wanted to just continue bringing in big, especially the helicopter-driven operations. I think that there was something like 5,000 or 6,000 helicopters that they lost in Vietnam. Well, we paid for them anyway. Okay, so Cassidy's Run it tells us about my dad in a kind of a backhanded way, saying, he's so important that we're going to tell this little lie. Of course, he was overweight. No question about that. I've got lots of medical records where say that the doctors, he was overweight, but then along comes somebody higher than that and puts a little stamp over it and says, approved. And the story is, this big boned man, is a healthy size for his frame, big frame. So, no, he wasn't kicked out of the FBI. He was absolutely recruited. He was recruited by the DIA to join SACSA, the DIA Defense Intelligence Agency, which was a outfit started in 1958 or 9 by President Eisenhower as a way to get intelligence directly for the services, which the CIA might not be able to provide or willing to provide. It's seen as a separate mission. Military intelligence is going to be different from the intelligence that a spy organization is looking for. So the DIA, and I'm not sure why, except for I guess they knew my dad. But some officers from there were the ones I believe that did the direct connection because they were named in his application for employment. Let me take a second and look at you guys' comments. I see that Infidel Apostate is talking about a very important book, SOG. Officially, SOG would answer solely to the office. That's it. Yeah, I have that book right over here. Yeah, it's that SOG is a book that I've read maybe 10 years ago, whenever it first came out, and it's been very, very helpful to me. John G. Plaster. Yeah, the rescue was desirable both for the well-being of the prisoners and for the morale of American fighting men and civilians. Yeah, isn't that interesting how morale seems to be a very important factor in a lot of military decisions, doesn't it? We had to do it because of morale, or we had to do it. You know, that is a reason for lots of engagements in activities that might get you killed. The final point proven by the Sante raid was one that Donald Blackburn had been making ever since being appointed SACSA. Well, anyway, I enjoy the chat very much, but I'm going to get back to. I did have a game plan tonight, and the next thing I wanted to do was to talk about this book, TDY by Douglas Valentine. Now, last week I had the great privilege of having Douglas Valentine as a guest on my show to complete his presentation that was intended for my dad's memorial service on June the 6th. But it was just terrific for me to hear Doug once again validate with absolute certainty that my dad is mentioned in this book as an important character named Mr. Hammer. Now, once again, my dad is at SACSA in this book. He is, of course, a former FBI agent, and one of the things that Doug Valentine told me about was the idea of being double-hatted. That this is a term that was thrown about a lot in those days, and maybe still is. Unfortunately, double-hatted can mean that you have a secret job that nobody else knows about. If you remember, we've talked about the idea of a focal point that was created by Alan Dulles, discussed by Fletcher Prouty in our readings of the JFK book, and the idea of a focal point is that the CIA has a person or office that it's kind of secret little contact within any agency or military unit. So if you needed a certain helicopter part from the base in some place, you could just you didn't have to go through channels. You could just contact your focal point and say, hey, I need this right away. Boom, and you get it. Totally separate chain of command working under the CIA without anybody else knowing it. It's not good. It's not a good way to run a free country. So that's the CIA. And so they would have a focal point officer in SACSA. Right. And this is where it gets complicated because we have a lot of very high ranking military officers in SACSA, but some of them are really there as CIA officers. And one of the most troublesome ones, historically speaking, is none other than Maxwell Taylor. The heroic airborne leader from World War II, the Battle of the Bulge, um, but a real adherent to the we now call the New World Order, the idea that Kennedy could take covert operations away from the CIA was quashed by Maxwell Taylor. It was Maxwell Taylor's book, The Uncertain Trumpet, that really laid out the case for massive, limited warfare. This limited idea of, hey, we have a nuclear umbrella. China's not going to hit us. Russia's not going to hit us. Nobody with nukes is going to hit us. And everybody else is scared to death of us because we got nukes. So we can create these low intensity conflicts wherever we want to in order to take over more of these so-called, newly freed colonial areas, places where there just happens to be untapped resources worth billions and billions of dollars. And that is the CIA's mission, is to obtain those resources and use that for the benefit of the big industries and corporations and the banks that finance them. And that, of course, has been the story since World War II with the IMF and the World Bank. And the great book by Perkins, The Confessions of an Economic Hitman, shows us that this is real and that these CIA types that often are wearing military uniforms now are going out and representing themselves as representatives of the United States, and we're the good guys and all that stuff. But really what's happening is you're entrapping some small country or some guerrilla group or some body that, just has a beef against the local government, and then you turn them into an armed revolutionary group in order that you can control the government after the chaos has subsided. And this idea of dividing and conquering is the method that we've seen the CIA do over and over again, and that most tragically in Vietnam, where they actually took, I think, about 1 million or 1.2 million of the Catholic peasants from the north and just shipped them down into the south and dumped them in Saigon, and they ended up, a lot of them, becoming Viet Cong because they had no way to eat. They had no way to make it. And of course, the old ancient family traditions of the South were not ready for these people. These people are not even Buddhists. These are Catholics. So it was crazy. But the CIA that was the policy that they were following, to divide and conquer and destroy, so that they could come in and own what's left over. Sounds like what's happening here, says Patricia Liberis. Yeah, it does, doesn't it? It's really one of the most revealing things that's happening now, is that we can see the resonance of what happened then and what happens, during my dad's time, when, he's basically presented with this opportunity to become part of this secret team. When Barney Cochran and another guy present him with the idea of, hey, here you are in Saxa, and you've got access to all of these special activities, units. You can put together our plane schedules for us. You can get the right people. I mean, he that was his expertise, was putting together special operations. Well, if smuggling is not a special operation, I don't know what is. That's what they're doing. So this is why TDY is such an amazing book, because now we know that my dad was the security officer, the guy that ran the whole operation and sent these folks out into Laos on a very, very dangerous mission in which a number of them were killed. But the mission was to record with video and photography and sound a drug deal between a CIA officer, a well-known CIA officer, and the Vang Pao opium lord, to buy opium from the drug lord in exchange for weapons, right? Then you take the opium and you take it to Saigon, or you take it to um, Bangkok, or you take it to Taiwan, and you go to the heroin labs and you make it into heroin, and then you sell it. Where do you sell it? Well, in Saigon, there was a lot of American soldiers, with not much to do, and you know, suddenly America has a big drug problem. But that's okay for the CIA. That's okay with them, but it was not okay with my dad. Until when they said to him, hey, here's this this book about terror in Vietnam, and look how they're terrorists, we have to fight fire with fire, and so we are organizing this operation, but you here in the seat, he's the guy that has to approve all the special operations. Well, why shouldn't he be part of the deal? He could then, you know, allow us to have a little extra room on the transport planes for this or that, or, tell these guys to stand down when a certain airplane lands. He could have a tremendous effect on what we generally call the Hallowell plan, which is the selling of dope to Americans and in America and servicemen around the world in order to finance their covert operations that they are sure they could not get Congress to pay for. So it's really their idea that they can take American troops, American assets, American helicopters, planes, you name it, and turn them into assets of their secret team. Just call up the focal point guy and say, hey, we need, 17, Bell helicopters in Tansanut by 5 o'clock. And, they're going to get there because of the CIA's secret organizations and secret team. Well, my dad was a very upright, moral, conservative person when it comes to things like drugs. And really, I can't see him turning a blind eye to this operation. He certainly wouldn't have approved of it. But here we have, the great Doug Valentine telling us that not only did he object to it, but that he ran an operation to try to catch these guys and to shut it down. Kennedy's man to smash the CIA. You know, that's that's the name that we came up with, and George Webb is right. That was my dad's job, was to run these special operations instead of letting the CIA do it. And when the CIA comes in and tries to take it over, he has what we call a McDuff moment. A McDuff moment where you say, I can't do that. No, I'm not doing that. But, having we've read the book. We know how TDY ends up, and clearly the drug trade is still going on. The CIA is still involved. And, you know, uh, Doug Valentine kept writing, wrote about the CIA as organized crime. Um, yeah, it's obvious that the CIA and organized crime have basically become the same thing. Um, Good guys in the light of day, and you know, it's the black hand at night. Well, as I say, everybody should read TDY. It's a short book. It's a heck of a great read. It'll keep you up till maybe 1 o'clock in the morning, but once you start it, you'll have a hard time putting it down. It's a very exciting book. And but the idea that Doug was able to identify my dad, after having written it 20 years ago, and he's absolutely certain about it, and so am I. So there's two very telling books that give us, my dad was way up there in the Pentagon. He's the guy that has to sign off on them passing some nerve gas information to the Soviets in an attempt to entrap them. And that tells us that, he knows about nerve gas, right? He knows about biological weapons. He knows a lot because he's been working for J. Edgar Hoover in a high capacity for 12 years. Now, let me take a minute and talk about J. Edgar Hoover and my dad's work with the FBI. There's two phases of that career. The first phase was when he was in his very first big assignment was the 68,000 application files. There was 2 years or a little more than 2 years in which my dad was assigned to run a team of agents and secretaries reviewing files that needed to be, and they're called application files. And Hoover apparently had a backlog of them. From my discussions with George Webb, with Wayne Madsen, and general information, it appears to me that my instincts were correct, that these were paperclip files. These were not the scientists themselves, but paperclip type files where the CIA was trying to get somebody into this country with a visa. And these files had come from all over the place, from the Army, from the Navy, from the CIA, from OSS, from all kinds of investigations that had been done preliminarily to see if the person would be allowed in the country under the regulations that were passed after World War II. And of course, we now know that the CIA was importing Nazis for science, for rocketry, for bioweapons, for chemical weapons, and for creation of political movements that would help them win elections with favorable candidates, such as the 1952 election of Eisenhower, which was how the Dulles brothers were able to obtain the office of Secretary of State and Director of CIA, was through their contacts with the old establishment, and the establishment was the Republicans with Eisenhower. Well, the next book is this one. Let's Call Him McDuff by George Webb. This is a fantastic introduction to my dad. George's work for 2 or 3 years investigating the leads that I gave him, has produced a wonderful book where he has introduced my dad's involvement in the Oswald investigation to our knowledge. It is quite a story how George and I got together. George tells it. Let's see, I'll read a little bit from his book on page 8. "Let's call him McDuff," I said to the amateur historian and Georgetown trial lawyer named John O'Loughlin, after he told me one of the most fascinating G-Man versus Russian spy stories I had ever heard. I just met O'Loughlin 3 hours earlier while walking the bloodstained last footsteps of Seth Rich's last moments alive in Washington, D.C.'s Bloomingdale neighborhood. I, George Webb, a newly arrived journalist in the D.C. area, was doing background research for a series of television shows about the death of Seth Rich, the supposed slain hero of leaking the Hillary DNC emails to WikiLeaks. Mr. O'Loughlin intercepted me and said he would like to share his dad's story with me because it concerned the FBI and the CIA. O'Loughlin thought there might have been foul play in his father's early death after a career at the highest levels of the FBI and the Joint Chiefs of Staff. His father was an FBI man and a close associate of FBI Chief J. Edgar Hoover, and McDuff, as I call the G-Man, seemed to be involved in similar intrigues as Seth Rich. Not only was there a telltale ring to Seth Rich's whistleblower death at the DNC, but McDuff was also involved in keeping an eye on Russian spies as they combed the Washington, D.C. area. I was ready to hear a real story of Russian spy intrigue in D.C. rather than the FBI manufactured tale that Trump worked with the Russians being repeated incessantly by CNN, along with the fake news that WikiLeaks hacked the DNC. Well, that's the beginning of one of his chapters, and he goes on to tell more about how we met and how we came up with McDuff, and we talked about a number of Shakespeare plays because George, aside from his prowess as an athlete and a journalist, is also quite a scholar. He certainly knows his Shakespeare, and we had a delightful talk about Hamlet, Othello, or Othello, as the English say, and of course Macbeth. And that afternoon was just a magical launch pad for me to start taking seriously the idea that I could really write a biography of my dad. And yeah, guess what? I did. And this is it. It's called McDuff Lives. And I show you a little bit of the book. I think I could show you a little bit of the book. Come back. Okay, now I'm just learning how to do this. There we go. Okay, cool. So what I'm showing you here is my PDF file that you send to Kindle to upload for the Kindle version. But what I'm hoping to do is to have Neighborhood News Studio print the actual hardcover or paperback versions. And I know that they've printed a number of them that are in the office up there in Michigan. I only have about 4 of them left here at home from the batch that they made when we had our memorial service on June the 6th. So it's hard to get a hold of them right now, and I'm sorry for that. But I had a lot of trouble working with Amazon to try to get the paperback up there, and I never succeeded at it. And then the next thing I learned was that they had dumped all of George Webb's books. And I thought to myself, that's disgusting. That is ridiculous. How am I going to now go on to Amazon and sell my book there if they're going to do that to George? I mean, they could do that to me too. But more importantly, George Webb put tons and tons of work into putting that Amazon book package together, and all of those books that he has up there. It's a terrible, terrible loss to all of us that those books are not available on Amazon anymore. So his response is, as always, he jumps right back up and says, "Well, let's build our own print shop." And so I don't know how many book binding machines he has up there now, but at least 4 of them. And there's his desire to take this away from Amazon is great, and I agree with that. So here's what I'm proposing to do is to just wait until George and Andy and Aaron, collect themselves after this disaster and can get the publishing going back again up at the studio, and then we'll start publishing them up there. And we're certainly going to do it in a way, that supports their work as well as here what I'm doing in my own work. So, but let's just first of all focus on trying to get my dad's story spread as much as we can. So that's why I am going to leave the Kindle version there for sale. It's at $9.99. It's 100. Well, it's not quite 100 the way it came out. It's about 90 pages, I guess, in the Kindle version, but you get all the photographs, and it's really nicely laid out. Andy did a great job with the layout. Marcia, my wife, helped me a great deal with editing the text, and I think the paper is very nice. They printed it on anyway, but if you would like to help me spread the story, and $9.95 seems a little steep, I apologize. It's really the only way that makes any sense financially for me to sell the book right now on Kindle. But do think about this: if you get a copy, you can print it. You can put it in a 3-ring binder. You can send it to Kinko's or FedExpress and have them print it for you. And you can actually print copies for your friends as well, because I'm not restricting you to just one copy. What I'm asking you to do is to get a copy of it and print it out, or share it otherwise with your friends. Share it with people you think need to know the story of McDuff, and how when you come to a McDuff moment and you get to a point where somebody says, "Hey, you're in. We're explaining the deal to you," and you say, "No, I don't like that deal." What happens then? Well, this is basically the theme of the book. I'm going to scroll forward to the next page here. I inserted this quote from Bertrand Russell, which I found courtesy of Executive Intelligence Review, the EIR publication, which is a great source for historical and recent quotes on material on policy, public policy, and foreign relations, and really all the terrible skullduggery of our country, as well as the good stuff, but mainly intelligence, meaning stuff that you can't read in the newspaper. Excellent reporting over many decades. Well, they did a number of great reports on Bertrand Russell, and from one of them, I have this quote, which I think is very, very much the book in a nutshell. It's my father's life in a nutshell, and I'll read it to you. On those rare occasions when a boy or girl who has passed the age at which it is usual to determine social status shows such marked ability as to seem the intellectual equal of the rulers, a difficult situation will arise requiring serious consideration. If the youth is content to abandon his previous associates and to throw in his lot wholeheartedly with the rulers, he may, after suitable tests, be promoted. But if he shows any regrettable solidarity with his previous associates, the rulers will reluctantly conclude that there is nothing to be done with him except to send him to the lethal chamber before his ill-disciplined intelligence has had time to spread revolt. This will be a painful duty to the rulers, but I think they will not shrink from performing it. Bertrand Russell. So my dad was just an average kid, what they used to call, oh, I guess they still do call the Irish folks in New England Micks, just another Mick. But this family had already started its climb upward in upward mobility. Uncle John had married the daughter of the mayor of Hartford. My and then he had become employed at the Hartford Insurance Company, Hartford Fire Insurance Company, which was the big Hartford. Well, the Travelers is in Hartford too, an equally large insurance company. But the Hartford is older and has, I think, an even more interesting and deep history. Some of it probably never be told. But the Hartford Fire Insurance Company employed my dad's Uncle John, and it's obvious to me that the connection to that wealth, specifically the Bissell family, and Richard M. Bissell Sr. was the president of Hartford Fire Insurance Company until his death in the early 50s. His son, Richard M. Bissell Jr., of course, was my father's nemesis and a member of the Health Alteration Committee, a person who considered himself to be a man-eating shark, and actually a neighbor from Connecticut that lives in the Mark Twain house, grew up in that somewhat occult, spooky old house, the Mark Twain house that his father had purchased. But the Bissell family and the Wasp families of Hartford adopted a young Irish kid who seemed to have promise, intelligence, good looking, physically strong, athletic. And they said, yeah, we'll give this guy a shot. And so they put him through Loomis and then Harvard and then the Navy, where somehow he became the midshipman, the commander of midshipmen of the class at Columbia University's Naval Reserve Midshipman School. Each class had 1,000 students or candidates, officer candidates, midshipmen, right? Out of 1,000 of them, what are the odds that my dad would be picked? Well, they picked him. Is that because somebody had their eye on him all along, or was it because of some specific merit that he had shown? Or did they just pull his name out of a hat? Well, I think probably we have an idea that somebody was keeping an eye on him and perhaps hoping that if they promoted him, that he would be of service to them later. Grooming. That's it, Corky. That's the word. Yeah, they were grooming him, and he just wouldn't go with it after the war. After he'd been through 2 years of combat, guys dying all around him, and They wanted him to go work for the big wealthy corporations. But you see, it was his mother that lived on the wrong side of the tracks that taught him empathy where there wasn't any in his father's family. That taught him to love the common people, that taught him the value of every human life, that taught him the joy of just being alive, to just being part of something, even if you don't have any money, you know, that American feeling of, hey, I'm free. I'm not rich. I'm not poor. But I'm okay. I'm doing fine. And I'm not controlled by some noble, somebody that claims they're better than me. And that's my father's story. I will not be part of this upper class, elite, manipulative, lying, deceptive, and treasonous bunch of criminals. I will not be a part of it. And he did everything he could to stop it. But he couldn't stop it. But we can. We can. And we will. Thanks for being with me tonight, guys.